Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today it is Short Story Tuesday, and I have an interesting short story to talk about. It is also Black History Month, so I wanted to highlight a few Black authors, some of whom I've talked about before. Others I'm just learning about for the first time. I invite you to go do that on your own as well, because it's always important to be exposed to a wide array of voices in your literature travels. And today's short story is all about an invasion of privacy. I am referring to Blues Ain't No Mockingbird by Toni Cade Bambara, which was published in 1971. For those who don't know, Toni Cade Bambara is an author that I've talked about on this channel before, so I don't need to go into too much detail. In addition to writing this short story, she also wrote The Lesson, which is probably one of the better short stories that I've talked about on this channel. But Toni Cade Bambara was an author, a writer, an essayist, a teacher, and an activist as well. Being active in the Black Civil Rights Movement in her time, where she lived throughout the 1900s. Also writing novels, short stories like this one, and a bunch of nonfiction as well. It's kind of a well-rounded individual who wrote about uplifting Black individuals in a time where their civil rights weren't where they wanted them to be, and also highlighting the great sort of systemic inequalities that exist in society. So a very interesting author. This isn't her actual name. She changed her name later in her life. I think her first name was actually Miltona. Probably doesn't really need to be said, but I just think it's a fascinating aspect of Toni Cade Bambara. And so without further ado, let's talk about Blues Ain't No Mockingbird. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So Blues Ain't No Mockingbird focuses on a narrator, an unnamed narrator, and their family living in a sort of rural area and kind of relaxing outside as the story starts. Just spending their day tending to the garden, or as is the case in The Grandfather, hunting for food and whatnot. But when at the start of the story, the grandma is kind of upset because there are some cameramen who are filming nearby, and she doesn't want them to film their house, to film them. So she's politely asking the cameramen, who they refer to as Camera and Smilin', when they finally do pop up at the house, she tells them to leave, if possible. That she says it in a very polite way that's not very direct, but still gets at the idea that they're not welcome at this house. And as the grandmother asks this, the cameramen reveal that they're county workers who have been instructed to film about food stamps and everything for the county, and so they are determined to stay and continue to film. And at that point, the grandma relays a story about how, she was near a bridge once, and there was a man on the bridge threatening to jump off, and people were surrounding that man to tell him, don't do it. It would be a mistake. And for some reason, one person with a camera showed up and started taking a bunch of pictures, kind of indicating that the grandmother doesn't have a high opinion of people who try to dramatize or try to invade on the privacy of such an intimate moment. But again, this doesn't seem to do anything for the county workers who are determined to keep filming. And at that point, the grandfather, the grandmother's husband, Cain, shows up, returns to the house. He comes out of the woods carrying a pheasant, and it's very intimidating. He's described as king-like and intimidating to by the narrator, and he's carrying around a hawk, and they he doesn't seem to want them to be there as well. And at that point, another hawk flies around, and it's scaring the cameraman, but Kane just straight up grabs the hawk out of the air and beats it up and kills it. And so he again showing how intimidating he can be, and he just turns to the cameraman and says, "Go, you're not welcome here." And again, they don't seem to understand it, so he just straight up grabs the camera and tells them, like, "You're in our garden right now. You're on our property. Please go away." And I think he breaks the camera at that point. The cameramen decide, well, we have to go home now. We have nothing to film with. And the children react by talking about how they're going to write a story in the future about the proper way to use a hammer. And that's about where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, Blues Ain't No Mockingbird is a pretty short story. It's kind of like the lesson. There's not a lot there, but there is a lot worth discussing. I think Toni Cade Bambara, based on the 2 short stories that I read, she's very good at like maximizing use of the space that she's working in. Even if there's not a lot of like writing there, there's still a lot worth thinking about. And one of the themes that she's working with here is the invasion of privacy. The grandmother doesn't want the county workers bothering the family and filming their property. It's likely that the grandmother, because she's the grandmother and this story was the story was written about 1970, maybe it takes place a bit earlier. Like maybe the grandmother comes from a time where privacy mattered, and now she's coming up against these filmmakers, these cameramen, who maybe come from a generation where there's less of that privacy, and it's just assumed that you're allowed to film wherever you want. So it's a clash of sentiments, of cultures, a clash of sort of value systems here, in addition to like a clash between county workers and a black family. And it's understandable why the grandmother would want to, keep her privacy there. Like, not everyone wants their lives filmed 24/7. Not everyone has a booktube channel where they're willing to talk into a camera and share their thoughts with the world. To give a good example here. But what's interesting is the county workers don't seem to understand. They're either unable to, possibly because the grandmother isn't using direct language. Again, this seems to be taking place in the South, so you could argue that she's using some of that Southern hospitality to say in the nicest way possible, "I don't want you here. Go away and never come back." And like maybe they're unable to understand this kind sentiment that she's expressing, or they refuse to leave because, as I'll talk about later, like they feel they have the permission to enter anywhere, that it's the county land, so they're allowed to be anywhere they want, and they don't have to ask this black family for permission to be all up in their space filming their lives. However, Grandfather Kane is a bit different in this story because he is more overt in his messaging. He just stares at the men and says, "You're in our garden. We would like you to not be in our garden. Get out of here." And he straight up grabs their camera and messes with the film. And, now they don't have their camera anymore. So he's saying, "I do not like this. Here are the things I don't like. Get rid of this camera. Get out of our lives." He's making it very clear that the county workers are unwelcome. And Toni Cade Bambara might be saying that some people need it explicitly spelled out for them like that, because otherwise they won't respond well to, a softer sentiment. There might also be some sexism at play because they weren't willing to listen to the grandmother, but they were willing to listen to the brawny grandfather in this scenario. Another element worth talking about in this short story is race. The county workers are meant to film poor blacks, it seems. Specifically, there's no direct writing that suggests that the main characters in the story, the family, the grandmother, the narrator, and their various children and cousins, like there's nothing to suggest that they are a black family. But given the cadence of their speech, given this is Toni Cade Bambara, I think it's safe to say that yes, it is it's just a rural black family, in addition to that, like so the county workers are meant to film these black families, and here's one of them in this rural area. Like it's kind of their job, and they're not going to be told no about it. What's also interesting is that they're filming for food stamps. And so, given the time period that this was set, and that so often black families are on food stamps, these county workers just assume that this black family is using food stamps. I think it's indicated in the writing that they have a garden, and also the grandfather hunts, as is the case of the hawk that he managed to kill. So I don't think this black family is on food stamps. I think it is the county workers who are leaning into a stereotype and believing, oh, well, if we just film this family, it'll make no difference. We're allowed to film whoever we want. And again, like the county workers are exerting their power over this black family. An additional element of race here is that typically in the South, many black dominated counties with a high percentage or high population of black families are still controlled by white counties, by white people, and the people in power are white. And so this could be an element of the white leadership forcing themselves upon black families in order to get the film that they want, in order to get the sort of sentiment about what they think food stamps represents to the mass population in this county. What I think how race comes in this even more is the grandmother kind of understands all of this. I think the family recognizes that they're being exploited by these white filmmakers in order to make them seem like not well-to-do, or that they're in need of this food stamp program, painting them in a very specific way, painting the black race in a very specific way. And the grandma understands this, and so she's trying to maintain control and dignity by telling these cameramen to get off of her land, that they're not welcome to film here. And again, this clash of these values and these sentiments are hitting one another, and the filmmakers aren't ready to leave. But I think the grandfather is kind of an example that you have to be overt, that you have to directly say, what you're doing is very bad, you're invading our privacy and making us feel less than, go away. You're not welcome here anymore. And I don't think Toni, Cade, Bambara really offers a value judgment on whether one of these strategies is for the best. But it's clear that Grandfather Cade's method works a little bit better. The last thing I just want to note is, what is the meaning of the title? Blues Ain't No Mockingbird seems like just a combination of words that don't quite make sense. But if you think about mockingbird, like mocking, pity, kind of a joke, and then also say blues, so like the hard times and struggle. What Toni, Cade, Bambara might be saying is that hard times and struggle aren't worth placing pity or making jokes about. And the county workers could be trying to portray black families as a joke and their struggle as a joke, and in that process they're kind of pulling down everyone who is black as a result, just trying to paint people of color as in need of constant help or not capable of sustaining themselves in any sort of way, and they need to be sort of shepherded by the white government. And it's a whole bunch of racism at play there. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Blues Ain't No Mockingbird by Toni, Cade, Bambara. A pretty solid short story, pretty interesting addition to the canon of short stories about black rural families, which seems to exist in a very strong way, not only with Toni, Cade, Bambara, but with a number of other authors that I've talked about on this channel. I should probably put up a category for that, or a playlist for that, because there seem to be quite a bit of those kind of videos out there. But I do recommend that you go out and read it. I'll put a link to it in the description. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Let's have a discussion about Blues Ain't No Mockingbird. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this story or this author if they do not already know. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and not invading privacy travels. Farewell.